Hello, I'm Harry Riley. Welcome to Harry's 10-Minute Tales. This is a diversion from those because it's the second chapter of my new novel called The Laird of Castle Ballantine, just as a taster. So sorry, my friend. I suppose I gave you all a shock. You could say that. I really don't know what came over me. Leonard McFadden shrugged, smiled weakly, and replied that he hoped the vicar was now returned to his normal self. It was the morning following the midnight vigil, and Leonard was resting his hand on the top of the large Celtic cross in the churchyard of the River Tweed. He had been absorbed in reading the dedication on the base of the tombstone as the Reverend strolled up to him. The simple inscription read, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Dummy Ballantine, late of the 57th Scottish Borderers, Rifle Volunteers, 1910 to 1945. He answered the call and gave his life for the love of his countrymen. No man gave us more. I see you have spotted our wonderful war hero. The churchman leaned forward and stroked the top of the stone lovingly, as one might pat a pet dog. We're so proud of him. He went right through the war and was finally shot as a deserter, you know. If his words were intended to shock, they certainly had the desired effect. The reporter looked at him sharply, shook his head in wonder, and said no, he hadn't known. He began to suspect that here might be the makings of another fine tale for him to get his teeth into. Oh yes, he was labelled a coward and a deserter from the field of fire by one of his own fellow officers, quite early on in the war, and later, just as it ended, he was caught and court-martialed by his regiment, found guilty and executed in Egypt by a firing squad. He was buried out there in unconsecrated ground. But his high rank, his nickname, and how did he come to be reburied here? The vicar chortled. So many questions. It was Leonard's turn to apologise. All I will tell you is that Thomas has a sister who still visits every week to tidy the grave and refresh the flowers. If you are really interested, you should meet her, but I warn you she's a prickly customer and still feels the hurt of his atrocious death, even after all these years. Leonard was due to return to his London desk at the Herald the following day, and wondered if this might be another one of those bleeding heart stories that could tie up his precious time with very little to show as a reward. He studied the stone, but it gave nothing more away, and so he had to ask the vicar one more question. At least, can you please tell me who paid for the repatriation and interment here? The man of God gave him a quizzical smile, shook his head and said, Why, that's easy. Our leader during the war, of course, Winston Churchill. He spoke at the funeral service and stood here, right where you're standing, along with Bernard Montgomery. Poor Thomas was finally laid to rest here at home with full military honours. Phew, whatever brought about such a posthumous reversal? For that you will have to make your own enquiries, or would you like me to do your job for you? He shook Leonard's hand, gave him a truly wicked smile, and wandered off, leaving the reporter to his thoughts. However, the Reverend returned a few minutes later and seemed thoughtful. Look, you seem a pleasant enough young fellow. Will you let me give you some advice? Leonard nodded. I know this particular lady quite well. You can tell her you have spoken to me about her brother, but don't go steaming in bull at a gate, and don't try to soften her up with flattery. She's quite shrewd, and can spot a fake a mile off. She would clam up immediately. Alison Ballantine is still an attractive woman, and shines in the company of young men. She presents the Brigadier's Challenge Cup each year at the Rowing Club, and the sportsmen adore her. So let her get to know you a little, before being too open or gushing with your compliments. I assure you, she has heard it all before. The vicar was now talking Len's language. What are her main interests in life? What makes her tick? The churchman shook his head. You youngsters, it has to be all black and white. No time for shades of grey and subtle half-tones, eh? But I'll tell you this. She is a regular member of the church. We see her at our weekly prayer meetings. She is a founder member of the Ladies' Guild and is a very keen gardener. Oh, and incidentally, a very good cook. She has written several popular books on traditional border cuisine. I hope that helps you in your quest. Oh, and by the way, I am right, aren't I? You were touching the stone when I came just now. Why, yes, I suddenly felt a little sick. I don't know why. I'm normally a very healthy person. Oh, aye. I knew I was right about you. We get visitors from all over the world coming here, returning to their roots. Pure instinct. You know, the way salmon return to their birthplace to spawn. Leonard felt a chill run down his spine. But I'm a Cockney born and bred. I'm sorry, I must have been mistaken. What is your name? Leonard McFadden. Then that tells me everything. Somewhere in your ancestral genes there lies a sleeping Scot. When, if you do get to meet Alison Ballantyne, you might ask her a question. Why are you here? Why should I do that? It makes no sense. She'll understand. The vicar shook hands, gave the reporter an enigmatic smile, and left him to his thoughts. Leonard thanked him for his generous assistance and promised to be circumspect with his enquiries. It would be wrong to say Leonard McFadden had no detractors. He was a man in a hurry, young and brash, and often offending people by insensitive questioning. But he got results. If his colleagues had a criticism of him, it was that he always over-egged the pudding. Even his editor said so and despaired of him ever changing, but he didn't really care. If his instinct was guiding him right, he had stumbled on a real dish of a pudding here, and it wouldn't take any over-egging by him to push it along. He had already phoned it through his report of last night's strange happening with the vicar and the 7 sisters, putting on a heavy spin that it might have had something to do with the supernatural. He knew this would whip up their readers' natural curiosity and sell more newspapers. Later today he would visit the archives of the local Gazette in Berwick-upon-Tweed and try and glean a bit more about the dead soldier in the churchyard. He had always hated the countryside, or thought he did, but there was something compelling about this old area that was drawing him in. He began to wonder if with a surname like McFadden he might really have some Scottish ancestry. He would have to find time to check it out. A sudden breeze blew up and made him sneeze. For all its romantic history and undoubted charms, he thought the Scottish borders could be the death of him. End of chapter 2. Thank you. Bye.